Welcome to the Surrogates Corner with James Mahan.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the Surrogates Corner. My name is James Mahan, CEO and founder of the Surrogates Corner, where I focus my practice on representing and advocating donors and surrogates. Today, I'm thrilled to have Sarah Paige, who's the COO at Art Risk Solutions. I like to affectionately call her the most awesome person at insurance stuff that I know. She is amazing, and she's here to answer a lot of questions that come up in our journeys that, frankly, we attorneys don't like to deal with, and we kind of have the professionals take care of them. So, Sarah, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks, James. I'm really excited to be here. I love this.
So, Sarah, one of the big questions we initially have is, when surrogates get into these journeys, specifically on the surrogacy side, medical insurance tends to be one of the big things that comes up. What should be some of the key questions they're asking either the agency or the IPs, maybe if they're in an independent journey, before the journey even begins when it comes to insurance-related matters, whether it's medical or life or the other ones that we see?
And honestly, I think one of the big questions is, am I going to need a new policy? Sometimes when we're actually placing policies, we talk to gestational carriers and they said, oh my gosh, I had no idea that I was even going to be getting a new policy. And so I think that's one of the big questions is, if you have your own insurance, you ask them, is my insurance okay? If it's not, then ask them, what policies are you looking to get me, so that you know who you're going to be talking to. Sometimes it goes so quick that people kind of just rush through, and then you're talking to someone, you're like, I don't know what this is for, but they're asking for my date of birth and my social and all, like all of
Application
these
information, I'm not sure
right,
why.
all these app information items that you're like, this is a lot that people are requesting of me. So I think just knowing, like, are you going to need life insurance, or do you already have life insurance that can be used? Perhaps do you have your own medical, or do we need to get you? Are you going to have new medical? If you're working and on disability, do you have disability that can be used, or do we need to get, or do you need to get new disability? So I think just asking that general question of, hey, I'm going to go through this, but what kinds of insurance am I going to need to be getting? Now, we're not saying it's the gestational carrier's responsibility to get it. We're just saying know what it is so that
Just
you're
to know
aware
that
of
that's
what's
a consideration that we have. Right.
absolutely, yeah.
And then, Sarah, a lot of times I hear the question or they hear the kind of statement of, is your policy surrogacy friendly or not?
Yeah.
So for the
Yeah.
surrogates who have a policy, what does that mean? And then when they come to someone like you, what are they looking for to make sure that that existing policy can actually be used during the journey?
Yeah. So surrogacy friendly means that it's going to cover the maternity expenses while you're acting as a surrogate. So it's really kind of clear on our end. The insurance companies sometimes like to do what we call a carve out, meaning they're going to cover maternity, but they may not cover it for you while you're acting as a gestational carrier. They may not cover that pregnancy. So we want to determine, is it going to be covered or is it not, so that nobody has surprise bills later on.
Right.
And what we ask for is we ask for what's called an evidence of coverage, which is a really long contract, basically.
Right.
It's
the
like
booklet we get from HR or something,
yes,
kind of,
yeah,
100-page PDF
yeah,
deals and stuff.
yeah. And it's called, like, it can be called 5 different things. It's really frustrating to get, but ultimately it's this, 70 plus page booklet that outlines every single legal requirement that the insurance company has or that you have as its member. And so what we do is we go through that booklet. We also call the insurance company to ask some very specific questions once we've gone through that. And that's kind of how we make that determination of, is there any language in that policy booklet that would be concerning, of maybe it's not going to cover, and then having that conversation can solidify what we're already seeing, or it can say, oh no, there's a document here that says it's fine. And we say, okay. So it just helps us understand, again, is it going to cover, is it not? And when we say surrogate friendly, we're saying, while you're acting as a gestational carrier, is the insurance company going to be nice, essentially, and cover your bills?
Or
That's what we're
difficult and
wondering.
not cover things.
Yeah, right. Right.
So, Sarah, if they wind up having a policy that's existing, either sometimes it's their own policy through work or a spouse's employer policy that they can't use, and we go and get them a new policy, how does that work for them when now they have two policies kind of simultaneously being used, or primary or secondary? Sometimes we see it called like that. How do they manage those benefits?
That's such a good question, and I always say I don't want them to manage those benefits because
Yeah.
it can be very frustrating. So the very first thing is that you as a gestational carrier need to know which is primary and which is secondary.
Okay.
And primary versus secondary means primary is the insurance company that's going to get sent all the bills first,
Hmm.
and they're going to process all those bills. And then secondary means whatever the insurance company doesn't pay for on that first primary policy, then those bills get sent over to a secondary insurance, and then they start to look at the bills to see what they're going to cover. The reason why this is so important is that sometimes your employer policy does not cover surrogacy.
Right.
And so we have to get that second policy. And there's this thought process of, oh, well, it doesn't cover, so I don't have to worry about that policy.
Hmm.
And then everyone's like, oh, we'll just submit it to the secondary policy. But in the insurance world, as much as I would love that to work,
Hmm.
it doesn't. You have to always submit to the primary first, have it denied, and then it has to go to secondary to be covered. If you just submit to secondary, they can actually stop paying bills because it
Okay.
didn't go through the proper channels.
Right.
So what I kind of tell people is if you're in that situation, there's a service that we offer. I would sign up for it. I would talk to
Okay.
your intended parent. It's called maternity claims management, and we're going to make sure that every single bill is processed according to that primary secondary.
Hmm.
And then I'm going to throw a term out there because why not? It's called coordination of benefits,
Okay. There we go. Hmm.
COB. So we're essentially going to manage that. I always tell everybody, it's not that you can't manage. A lot of what we do, people can do on their
Yeah.
own.
Hmm.
It's just, do you want to spend the time, effort, resources? And there
Right.
is frustration with it. So again, from a gestational carrier standpoint, I always say like the joke on who's on first, which is an old,
Hmm.
old skit, but
Yeah.
know who's on first, know who's paying first, know who's then going to pay second.
Okay.
And if you don't want to manage it, then again, reach out and hire somebody who will the
Okay.
entire time because it
And that's
can
something you
be
guys can do
ineffective.
regardless of whether it's an agency journey or an
A-
independent journey, right? It doesn't
Absolutely.
matter which one it is.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. And then if we have these policies, if we've gotten through that step and we have things hopefully in the right order, in the right place, what do we do when things either don't go according to plan, there's a complication, there needs to be an extension, things aren't covered? Like how does that work, and what does your team do as part of kind of that, either that management or stuff that your services you provide?
Yeah. So again, I always tell everybody as soon as you run into any sort of problem, reach out immediately because at least then we can start to guide on what to do. Now, there's a myriad of things that we can do. We can just, if it's your own policy, we can guide you on how to go about it. If we take over and it's again an employer policy, we have to get HIPAA signed and things like that, which we can do.
Hmm.
There's usually like a fee that's charged for that because, of course,
Yeah.
we want to be
The
able to
permissions to
manage
be
it
able to actually
completely.
manage it. Yeah.
Yeah. If we placed it, then it's part of our service. If it's
Okay.
not running the way that we anticipated it to run, so kind of the most common, which sounds super scary, it's not because we deal with it all the time, but it sounds scary, is that you may get a phone call from your obstetrician that says, we looked at your insurance and it doesn't cover, and we placed the policy, right? So we've already done all the vetting, but they'll say, I'm sorry, we don't cover surrogacy. Don't panic. I always tell everybody, don't panic. Call us right away. We'll get on the phone with the OB's office, with the insurance company, with you. It's like a lovely four-way call, and we iron it out. It usually takes about 20 minutes to iron out.
Okay.
Sometimes it's just they asked the wrong question
Right.
and got a wrong answer. And so
Okay.
now we have just have to, yeah. So like I guess the short answer is you call us.
Right. You guys will handle that, but don't. It's kind of like the lean settlement letters. Like, don't panic, take a deep breath,
Yes.
call me or call you.
Yes.
Call you first for important stuff. But yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, that's
Mhm.
why it's truly why we're here, right? As the professional sitting in this seat, it is to be able to take on those questions and those worries and to make sure that you're guided the entire time. So
Right.
we're not somebody, who's going to get you in a policy or determine something and then say, "Oh," and walk away. That's
Yeah.
not
No,
it.
no,
Like
it's your problem. You figure it out. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Have fun. Call the
Right.
insurance company. That's not
Yeah.
it.
That's what everybody wants to do. Just second to
Right.
calling your lawyer is calling your insurance company. Um,
Right.
so Sarah, one of the things even journeys are going super smoothly, everything's working great. I've had this happen a number of times in the last year, especially with the gig economy and things just changing the way they are. Surrogates want to or would like to move. I've always thought of insurance as kind of being state specific. I know there are policies that are more general or geographical, but how does that work when a surrogate is set with a policy, an OB, a hospital, and they want to relocate? Is that possible? Can we do it midstream, or what kind of things do we have to look at for that?
Yeah, so a lot of times we're able to do it midstream. I think again, the earlier that we know anything, the
Always
easier
better.
we can work with it. Yeah. When you move, and one of the interesting things about the ACA is they said, look, even if you move counties, if there's one additional insurance that is open, you can change policies. Now, when you move states, you have to. You can't
Right.
keep your policy that when you're in a new state. There's a
Mhm.
completely different jurisdiction, right? So we have to, and usually different insurance companies
Right.
completely. So,
Mhm.
so we have to get something new. It takes about 15 days to get something in place. The great thing is that you don't ever have to cancel your insurance and then wait for the other insurance to start. You
Okay.
have a 60-day period on both ends. So
Oh,
you
to
have
overlap.
60 days, yeah, to get the
Yeah.
policy, and then you have 60 days to cancel the policy once you move. And so there should never be a gap in coverage.
Agreed. Okay.
Of course, you'll need to be reestablished with an OB, especially if
Mhm.
you're moving out of
The
state.
providers and stuff. Yeah. Mhm.
Absolutely. And we can help verify whether the new ones are, or give you a list of people that would be considered in network. We can give you a list, like if you're looking for, level 3 NICU hospital, we can give you a list of those hospitals. So we'll try and, again, work with that transition and make it as smooth as possible, because it does happen actually quite frequently that people move for various reasons. And it can be a little, scary, to be perfectly
Right.
honest, because you're
Yeah.
getting new coverage and you don't know, and you have new doctors and all that stuff. So
Mhm.
kind of our role in this is to take away some of that scariness in terms
Mhm.
of you're going to be covered. We'll make sure that you're in
Right.
network, things of that nature that at least we can control on our end.
Right. Not going to be gapped and stuff that everyone kind of freaks out. Like, what happens to that one bill that's in between limbo and no one's going to go with?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, that's good to know because I've seen that a lot more recently. And just questions come up like, I'm thinking about moving. I
Yeah.
applied for a job. I'm waiting to find out if it works. Like,
Yep.
can I? And the travel section, the contract always usually say we're going to deliver in this date. But I've always told them if we can make it work with insurance, then usually it's
Yeah.
something we can agree to. So that's really great
Yeah.
to know.
Yeah.
So, Sarah, when some of the policies that are being purchased for the surrogate are they picked up by the agency or by the IPs, maybe in an
Yep.
independent journey, how
Yep.
does the surrogate know like what she needs or what she's asking for? Does it matter like family, no family, kids, no kids, existing policy or not? Like what kind of things should they be thinking about when someone else is getting a policy for her?
So they should know all the things.
Okay.
So they, like, whatever, again, you should always know what policies are being purchased for you or on your behalf, because
Mhm.
it does affect you.
Right.
If your name is being written on a policy somewhere, then it affects you.
Mhm.
So even if it is a policy where the intended parents are the primary on it and you're a secondary, which is sometimes can happen,
Okay.
still no. And
Mhm.
I would say, you should know what the coverage is and why it's being purchased. So, what is the purpose of the insurance? That's super helpful to know. And I would say, in terms of like whether you want the, let's say like beneficiary for life insurance,
Mhm.
know who that's going to be. Have that
Right.
listed out. A lot of the insurances are going to be listed if you're working with an agency, are typically within the agency's agreement. So you'll
Okay.
see, there's going to be life insurance. There's going to
Mhm.
be what we call loss of reproductive organs. Inside of the contract is where all those numbers exist.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
how much life
Allowances
insurance
and
is?
sure.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. So, that's kind of, we use both on our end. So, we say, okay, what are you required to get by the agency? And
Mhm.
then, what does your contract require in terms of the numbers that we need, meaning how much coverage you're going to need for
Actually
these
get for
specific
these
things? Yeah.
policies.
So,
Okay.
we use both of them. And so, as a gestational carrier, know both
Mhm.
for sure. I think there's a lot of information definitely flying at you. I think the more that you know, the more you're involved, the more questions you can ask, the less surprises that happen later on when you're like, oh, I didn't know I was only getting $1,000 for a fallopian tube.
Right.
I
Yeah.
would have loved to have,
Yeah.
maybe
Usually
had
more, especially
1,500,
now, but
right?
it's not your problem. Mhm.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So, in terms of, I think a lot of times people assume that insurance is either handled by IPs or by the agency. A lot of times, my service kind of like someone's taking care of it. I'm not sure. Are there things that you at Art Risk do specifically for surrogates, or things that are directly kind of guided towards them, as opposed to maybe the journey or the IPs or the agency?
Yeah, so one of the things that we do is monthly we do have a GC webinar.
Okay.
So, and it's live. So
Mhm.
we get on there, we answer questions, we go through the typical insurances that are perhaps in a contract or that the agency likes or the intended parents get, so that you can understand that. We open it up for questions so we can ask questions. There, we also have gestational carrier guides to help you understand a little bit more of what the different insurances are. And I think the other thing is that, and this isn't something necessarily that we do, but it's something that we tell all the agencies and intended parents and podcasts like this is
Mhm.
we're your agents at the
Right.
end of the day. So you have direct access to us to have a consult, to have a conversation. There's nothing that you would need to pay for or do anything like that. That's just us, of course, wanting to make sure that you're fully informed on
Right.
this. Any insurance that is specifically in your name, we call you and we have a conversation with you about so that you're aware of what's going on. And that's your time. Ask us any question you want. We will stay on the phone with you and
Yeah.
answer anything that
Mhm.
potentially could come up.
That's awesome. It's like the State Farm commercials. They're like you're there for them no matter what's kind of going on.
A hundred
Um,
percent.
That's awesome. I've seen a lot of times where IPs will be getting certain policies. They will add themselves on as beneficiaries, maybe for a life insurance policy, or you mentioned the loss of organ rider policy. Are there certain policies that maybe you're helping IPs get for them, but that wind up being protective or good options for the GC as well?
Yeah, so a couple of the items that we found, it's really interesting. So when we start doing policies, we start them from the standpoint of either an agency wants it or an intended parent wants it.
Hmm.
And then as we get work through them, we realize the additional benefits essentially. And one of the things that we've noticed as additional benefits are not necessarily the insurance policies, because those are things that the intended parents are typically responsible to pay anyway. So
Pay
there's
for.
not that same weight. It's actually on the service end. So we do
Hmm.
premium bill monitoring, we do the claims management side.
Okay.
And what we have found is that especially in independent journeys, that the stress relief taken off of gestational carriers, they
Hmm.
don't have to worry about the bills that are coming in because somebody else is making sure that they're getting paid and paid
Right.
appropriately and paid on time.
Hmm.
Their coordination of benefit, they're not worrying, oh my gosh, my insurance company called and they're not covering this, or this got denied. Like, you have
Hmm.
eyes on it the entire time.
Right.
It really has been, I think that was the biggest takeaway for us, outside of intended parent saying it was nice that someone managed it, was that the gestational carriers had such a reduction in that stress leading
Hmm.
over. I'm getting all of these bills and I'm trying to make sure the right people get it so that not only they get paid, but perhaps if you paid a copay, you also get that reimbursement amount, right, of that
Right.
$25 or $30. We send everything to escrow. Like, there's just this kind of third party that ends up being able to, minimize anything that perhaps could get missed. Because
Hmm.
sometimes I always tell everybody, especially if in a pregnancy, there's so many bills coming in the door at random times. And sometimes it'll look like you didn't pay something and the intended parents didn't pay something, but it's
Right.
just ship passing in the night of like, no, it got handled. It's
Right.
just
Yeah.
that they had already sent out that bill, a
Uh,
week ago. And so it alleviates all of that kind of confusion that tends to be around those medical bills, especially later on in the pregnancy.
Okay. And then, real briefly, Sarah, a new one I've been seeing come up is a short-term disability policy. That always tends to be an issue for contracts, is who covers lost wages and what happens if you're put on bed rest. In like 30 seconds, can you just briefly outline, and I'll make sure all the surrogates go to your webinars if you do one that's on that. That would be awesome. But what does that look like for them? Because a lot of my clients don't have short-term disability either through the state or through their employer.
Yeah. So the short-term disability is going to cover it. It covers up to about 56% of your gross lost wages, which is about 80% of your net.
Okay.
And the intended parents will be responsible for the balance of it. But what it does, it also covers childcare and housekeeping, so that if you go on bed rest and those are additional things that are needed, it will cover those. Again, it's a way for you to make sure on your end that you're going to get paid out for those times that you're missing. It is for bed rest, so I want to make sure, like, it's not just for
Mhm.
going to an appointment, but you
Right.
have
Yeah.
to be on
Like a
medically
physician order,
necessary
bed
bed
rest order,
rest.
or like unable to do the same thing you need for
Yeah,
basically a disability policy used in
yeah,
the day. It's not for your reaching
yeah,
the ideal
yeah.
point.
But the biggest difference is that in a normal disability policy, it's a 30-day period to wait till you're getting paid out. And this policy, it's 7 days. So it's really, and it's specifically for surrogacy and gestational carriers. So it's a great option if an employer policy isn't available.
Okay. That's such great information to know. It's usually one of those areas where it makes me concerned, especially on independent journeys where like
Yes.
the surrogate thinks they're responsible for all this. So
Yeah.
surrogates, go talk to Sarah for these things related to these
Please
policies
do.
that are good for you. Well, Sarah, thank you so much for joining us today on the Surrogates Corner. It's great to have you sharing your insight and experience. For all of my people watching, please look up Art Risk Solutions. Go to their webinars. They are a great resource, whether you use them for services or not. Educationally, they are fantastic. Sarah, I would love to have you back on sometime in the future to discuss other things that do come up. But for now,
Yeah.
thank you very much. It was a pleasure
Thank
having
you.
you, and I wish you all the best.
Thanks, James.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.